Shoplifting is becoming all too common in the 5 boroughs. Supermarkets have become one of the hardest hit stores, and one local chain is now taking matters into their own hands, beefing up their security.
So a particular grocery store chain has a problem at one of its locations, and it's located down the block from one of the largest shelters for asylum seekers in New York. But while some blame shelter residents for the increase in crime, others say the real issue is our city doesn't care if grocery stores get robbed, and hasn't for a long time.
A community in Brooklyn tonight coming together asking for help. They say migrant shelters in their neighborhood are leading to violence and bringing in dangerous gang members.
Store managers say some of the most common items being stolen are everything from laundry detergent to meats, even ice cream.
We've seen it at pharmacies, so much stuff under lock and key, all an effort to fight the shoplifting epidemic, and scenes like these. But now supermarkets are embracing the anti-shoplifting campaign.
We are here today because there is an attempt to put our neighborhood back 30 years in time.
Shoplifting is bad. It's terrible.
Coffee, cheese, shrimp, nothing is safe.
Those in attendance tonight say they aren't opposed to housing migrants in their neighborhood, just not thousands in a span of 2 blocks.
You are mass warehousing nearly 4,000 migrants in one city block across 2 shelters.
There is now a real concern among business owners that shoplifting will skyrocket and become 10 times worse.
So a grocery store near a shelter apparently has a problem with rising theft. But while everyone's focused on the asylum crisis aspect of this, nobody's upset that the crimes in question aren't something New York City cares about stopping, because they're nonviolent and have already been decriminalized. Which is why as far back as 2022, 93% of all grocery stores in the city reported being victims of theft. And why wouldn't they when food just gets more and more expensive every single year, and when nobody in New York goes to jail for stealing when the amount is under $1,000? And that brings up a big question. If a small number of asylum seekers from a nearby shelter are indeed robbing a local grocery store, aren't they just committing what New Yorkers maintain is a victimless crime nobody suffers from? Because that's the progressive mindset that critics say has allowed a $4.4 billion shoplifting industry to exist in our state. And it's why repeat criminals of all backgrounds continue to roam our streets, stealing from stores at will, while never being blamed for the crimes they commit. Oh no, instead they're viewed as victims of society who deserve unlimited second chances by our justice system, which is why it makes sense that we've got more products locked up on our shelves than we have thieves in jail. And that brings us to the real reason why there seem to be rising levels of theft at stores near shelters in our city. These areas have all experienced recent population growth, and since our city doesn't punish theft, any population increase is gonna come with an increase in criminals who commit crime. Doesn't even matter where they're from. This means we're gonna have shoplifting increases everywhere as our population grows. It just might be happening faster in neighborhoods that have shelters versus those that don't. Yet for months, residents have been complaining about the size of this particular shelter. It's one of the largest in town, and residents say there are just too many people living there. It's overwhelming neighborhood resources and leading to violence. On top of that, multiple local businesses complain that the entire neighborhood now feels unsafe. And if the grocery store there ends up shutting down, people in that neighborhood will not have another affordable option. So here we are by a Key Food, one of a few local grocery stores under this brand name here in New York City. They're great. They've got low prices. Generally, if you live near one, it will be the cheapest grocery store. But unlike this particular store, which shows no signs of an ongoing theft problem, even if they do have one, the store that's 1 block away from one of the city's largest physical shelters has an entire security apparatus with cameras, and apparently they're even now going to start hiring security guards. Now, over 200,000 people have come to New York seeking asylum, the vast majority of whom did not come here to steal from Key Foods. But the problem is, in a city that's already got high crime and high theft, any increase at all could be enough to shut a business down forever.
Residents of Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, taking to the streets Tuesday evening, demanding the closure of this migrant shelter at 47 Hall Street, where more than 3,000 are being housed. They say the neighborhood is plagued with violence, and it all stems from the shelter.
So the residents who live near this particular shelter, they say it's too large to be a humane, place for people to live, and they say that the city isn't doing enough to help manage the neighborhood now that it has a whole bunch of new residents. Which may be true. After all, if a certain number of people who enter a supermarket steal things no matter what, it could be that a lack of police might make criminals feel emboldened to take things that they shouldn't, which, according to the New York Post, is exactly what's happening here, and this grocery store will start hiring security guards to police the entrances and the exits. On top of that, it's not just the Key Foods that's having a security and a theft-related issue. There are other businesses in the area say that theft is also affecting them as well in ways that it hadn't before the shelter arrived, which is incredibly troubling. But there's a problem. Even if Key Food goes and gets security guards to hold customers' backpacks at the front door while they shop, the store cannot prevent people from shopping with their own personal bag. So if somebody comes in with a bag that looks like a shopping bag, they can't take it away from them because single-use plastic bags are banned in New York, and it's the law that customers have to be able to bring their own to avoid paying a bag fee at checkout. But even though a particular store may have more of a crime problem than it did in the past, shoplifting at grocery stores in New York, it's been a problem for a long time, and our local officials have never done anything about it, which is why this grocery store isn't the only one hiring security.
Gristedes, which has 28 stores citywide, is beefing up their security in the hopes of cracking down on shoplifters. Store managers say some of the most common items being stolen are everything from laundry detergent to meats, even ice cream.
I came here 10 years ago.
So other stores in town, they've got shoplifting issues too, and it's not just people stealing things to eat. They're stealing things to resell. And unfortunately, even grocery stores that sell something as perishable as ice cream, which melts, and some parts of town, they have a theft problem because what gets stolen from here won't melt by the time it gets resold at a little bodega, kind of like this one. The same goes for items like detergent that some criminals will steal and then bring directly to local laundromats and try to sell to people inside using the machines. Nonetheless, a recent investigation says that asylum seekers have been caught stealing from this particular grocery store, some still wearing their lanyards that let them in and out of the city's shelter systems. Apparently, they steal things like beverages, deli meats, toothpaste, shampoo, and I'm not entirely sure this is part of some sophisticated retail theft operation, even though those definitely exist in New York and have been documented. Instead, it looks more like people are just committing a crime of opportunity, which other businesses say is happening as well. And now you've got residents of the area calling for the shelter to either be shut down or reduced to just 10% of its current population.
For almost a year, they have been pleading with their councilwoman, Crystal Hudson, and Mayor Adams to do something about it.
You are mass warehousing nearly 4,000 migrants in one city block across 2 shelters.
Those in attendance tonight say they aren't opposed.
Now, what you have here is 4,000 people living in 2 different shelters that are on the same block. And it looks as if the city moved in a whole bunch of new people to this neighborhood, but didn't increase the resources to care for that neighborhood in proportion to the population it now has. Which would likely be the case in any neighborhood in town if you were to transplant 4,000 people there who cannot work, cannot have jobs, and have no choice but to spend all of their time in that part of town. But it's not just the grocery store. Different local businesses have different complaints about the environment. One of those is a local self-storage facility who says that the presence of this big shelter is affecting them negatively, even though they don't actually sell physical products or food. They say that they're losing business because when people pull up to the shelter, they see massive crowds of individuals at certain hours, and they think to themselves that it's not a safe, well-maintained area. They think that if they put their stuff in the storage facility, it may get stolen, even though the storage facility is secure and well-guarded. And workers at one local deli say that they're just sick and tired of calling the police every time they get robbed because it's a daily occurrence, multiple times a day at this point. And that's a big problem because if you have a local deli in a high-crime area, you can't do what this deli right here is doing, selling things on the sidewalk, expanding their operations, so to speak, to take advantage of every inch of real estate. It's an expensive city. I'm sure their rent's expensive. But apparently stores that are located near the shelter claim they're getting robbed so often they don't even bother calling the authorities because nothing's going to happen. The police are going to show up a day late and a buck short, and no one is ever going to be apprehended, much less put in jail for this type of crime. But even though there might be a new crime wave affecting this neighborhood that wasn't there before the shelter arrived, the fact that this crime in itself isn't punished or clamped down on in any way makes it look like the real criminals aren't the thieves themselves. Instead, critics say it's the people who allow them to roam the streets, robbing businesses whenever they feel like it. So here we are at our local police precinct, and the police, they're not the criminals. It's their job to stop them, but every time they do, an entire system kicks in to make sure those crooks get right back out on the street, which is why rampant theft is a problem pretty much everywhere in this town.
Chairman and CEO of Christini's and D'Agostino supermarkets, John Katsimatidis, blames bail reform for the increase in crime, saying criminals have no fear of getting caught.
Three strikes and you're out? Not gonna happen. At what point do you throw the key away?
And shoppers.
So here we have the chairman of another local grocery store chain pointing the finger squarely at New York's decriminalization efforts, also known as bail reform, for why crime is up at his stores. And there are many who say this is the reason crime is up at pretty much any stores selling anything in this town, because bail reform has eliminated cash bail, the money you pay to leave jail, for many nonviolent offenses, including shoplifting, which means people accused of nonviolent crime like that are either freed the same afternoon they get caught, or are released under certain conditions like electronic monitoring or supervised release. But critics say the problem with these reforms is, even though they allow someone to be released under the promise that they come back to court when it's time, they say that rarely happens, and a lot of people are out there committing more crime after never being held accountable for it. And the reason that's a problem is because many times the person stealing from a store, they're not a first-time offender. Oftentimes they are repeat offenders. These are people who've done it before, didn't learn anything if they got caught that time, may have never been caught because there aren't enough police. Either way, according to this article, 66% of people released under bail reform were rearrested again within 2 years. Plus, 49% of those people, when they were rearrested, it wasn't for another nonviolent misdemeanor, no, it was for a felony. And studies like this have led some to suggest that releasing criminals doesn't teach them anything, except that it teaches them what they did wrong that could lead to an arrest, possibly making them better at committing crime since they might not make the same mistake next time. And not only does this turn our supermarkets and our bodegas and our clothing stores, all of our stores, into a training ground for criminals, it's also a big problem for police.
There is now a real concern among business owners that shoplifting will skyrocket and become 10 times worse. The police department is already trying to replace some 3,000 officers who have either retired or resigned in the last 3 years or so. But the really alarming number this year is a departure of close to...
So not only are our stores afraid that thefts may increase, it's going to happen likely because our police force is shrinking, not increasing. A problem in neighborhoods of the city that are growing very rapidly. Which won't come as a surprise to many people, especially when this city led the nation in chants to defund its police force just a couple of years ago. And now you have residents of some neighborhoods saying there are not enough resources to keep their places well managed. Which is odd because residents of Clinton Hill, near where that shelter is located, they're very vocal that as progressives, they don't have a problem with the presence of the shelter. They just want it to be smaller, and they want more resources to help manage the neighborhood where it's in, but they're not asking for more police for some reason. And when they say they want more resources to deal with crime, perhaps that's coded language for saying they want more police without actually saying they want more police. And on the other hand, a shelter system of 4,000 people on a 1-block radius, that very well may be too big, and it wouldn't normally exist in the city's current shelter system, which doesn't allow facilities to be that big. But this is an emergency humanitarian crisis. The shelters on Hall Street exist to deal with that emergency, and it is what it is at this point. But even if the city does heed the calls from residents and businesses to provide more resources to the area, will that really stop the shoplifting problem? Because after all, with the way our laws are, all the police can do is follow criminals around and waste their afternoon by putting them in the back of a police car, taking them somewhere, and then letting them go. Which is a huge problem when you've got repeat offenders taking advantage of such a system. But on the other hand, bail reform is a mixed bag because some studies say that it does help people who commit their very first offense not to go on and commit subsequent offenses. It does help some people stay out of jail and perhaps not suffer the same consequences as somebody who really deserves them. But the counter argument to that is that if you had real penalties for people who stole, even if it was their first time, even less people would take a chance at a life of crime.
The problem here in New York State is that any retail theft under $1,000 is considered a misdemeanor and there is no bail required. So shop owners say in many cases, those individuals who are arrested for shoplifting will be released from jail and then come right back to the same store and steal more items.
Yeah, that's the real problem, because if someone steals once and they want to steal again, there's literally nothing stopping them from doing that, which is why so many people are. And this is stupid because we've passed a package of reforms that explicitly allow this to happen. It's not like when we passed bail reform, we also passed laws that required people to be held in jail after a certain number of offenses, like, say, a 3 strikes rule. Nope, that doesn't